Did the U.S. military cover up encounters with mysterious beings in Afghanistan? Tonight, we follow the trail. From the high valleys of Kandahar to the caves of Kandahar, soldiers whispered about shapes in the dark, and reports that vanished as quickly as they appeared. Afghanistan, 2001 to 2021, 20 years of war, dust, and mountains that swallow sound. Patrols moved at night along goat paths older than Rome. Radios hissed. Footprints appeared where no patrol had walked. And once, deep in a narrow wadi north of the Pek, a squad recorded a heat signature that stood 7 feet tall, then faded without moving. That entry exists in a real log the way all wartime paperwork does, but entire lines are blacked out. What did those lines hide? Listen closely. In a land of cave networks and folk tales, where the wind is an old storyteller, some soldiers swore they weren't alone. Not enemy, not civilian, something other. The files grew thicker, the redactions grew bolder, and the rumors grew teeth. We begin with a single night, a single patrol, and a single transmission that shouldn't exist. The tape was short, the words were simple, but the meaning was terrifying. Do you hear it too? The night the mountains answered, the mountains were black teeth against a starless sky. The squad stepped single file along a ledge no wider than a forearm, boots feeling for edges, breath hitching in the thin air. No one spoke. Words carry in the Hindu Kush even when you whisper. Their world was the beam of a night vision monocular, the soft green glow on skin, the slow rise and fall of a radio antenna that tapped the sky like a metronome. From far below, a dog barked once, then stopped. The valley held its breath. They were an hour north of the Pek, in a pocket of Kandahar province where the map turned from contour lines into guesswork. The point man held up a fist. The squad froze. In that pause, the mountain spoke, not with words, with a subtle, impossible rhythm. Gravel fell, then stopped. A breath, but not from a human chest. Too steady. Too deep. They waited for the usual tells, the scratch of a rifle on stone, the scuff of a boot, the metallic whisper of a charging handle. Nothing came. Only the feeling of a large presence just beyond the corner of your eye. They moved again. 10 meters, 15, the radio crackled. A single word cut a line through the night, clean and sharp. Contact. The squad leader slid to his belly, glassed the slope with the monocular, and saw it. A pale signature at the edge of the thermal, wider than a man, shaped like a silhouette in the fog, standing in the open, watching. He blinked. The signature pulsed once. Then it cooled, and vanished. No shots. No sprint, no sound of retreat. Just gone. They took cover. They waited for the ambush that should have followed. It didn't. The mountains were listening. The squad leader breathed into the microphone. Keep eyes up. Keep moving. 10 minutes later, they reached the saddle and dropped into a rocky bowl that killed the wind. The air was heavy, still. One of the younger soldiers whispered that the rocks felt warm, even in the night. The others told him to shut up. Then the point man stiffened. There was a shape between two boulders. The shape stepped back without stepping, like heat bending the horizon. The radio hissed. Batteries that had been green an hour earlier dipped to red. At dawn, they returned to base with nothing to show. No brass casings. No blood. No broken branches. The squad leader filled out an after-action report, the way all reports are done, with the same tired boxes and the same tired lines. The report wrote itself until it didn't. He reached the section labeled Unusual Observations and hesitated. That's where the war gets blurry. That's where you write the thing you don't want to say out loud. He typed 5 lines. He saved. He submitted. The copy that surfaced months later did not show 5 lines. It showed 3 blacked out. The 2 that remained were careful, professional, compiled for a chain of command that does not like surprises. Thermal contact, unknown, no engagement. The rest was a rectangle of ink, as if the page had looked back at him and decided to swallow the words. Was it a standard redaction, the kind that hides names and locations? Maybe, Was it the removal of a detail that made the encounter more than weather and nerves? That's the question that keeps veterans staring at the ceiling at 3 in the morning, replaying the way the signature pulsed, the way the air grew heavy, the way the mountain seemed to lean closer as if to listen in. The squad leader, years later, told the story the way soldiers tell stories when they still respect silence. He didn't embellish. He didn't salute. He didn't try to convince anyone. He only said he'd never felt a presence like that, and he'd never seen a thermal signature behave as if it was watching him back. He paused then. He added that he'd written a word he'd never used in a report before. He wouldn't repeat it. He only said the word didn't feel like it belonged to a modern war. Downrange, rumors travel faster than supply convoys. Interpreters carry them. Helicopter crews carry them. A cook hears something from a mortarman who heard it from a radio operator who sits 3 tenths down. From a signals intelligence sergeant who doesn't tell stories but does raise his eyebrows when the subject comes up. In this way, the vanished thermal in Kunar started to rhyme with other nights, other patrols, other silences. The Korangal had its own tale. Nuristan had 2. Kandahar, when the moon was thin enough to hide a world, had one that no one could tell without lowering their voice. Inside the wire, people joked about the jinn, half to mock it, half to keep it at arm's length. Outside the wire, some of the same people stopped joking. Afghan National Army soldiers had a word for it, and for centuries before that, villagers had a ritual for it. They burned a little salt. They left a stone on a ledge. They never whistled after dark. A young American in a plate carrier might laugh at that before stepping off. He laughed less on the walk back. If you've read enough wartime paperwork, you know the rhythm. You know what fits on the page, and you know what gets erased in the retelling. It's easy to say that fear makes ghosts. It's easy to chalk a heat signature up to a trick of the device, to call a vanishing shape an artifact. It's easy to blame batteries. It's harder to explain why a trained squad leader typed a word he'd never typed before, then watched it disappear behind a bar of ink. Here's the first payoff. In stateside archives, away from the dust, there's a cluster of documents that reference a field inquiry into anomalous, human-like signatures in the Kunar area during winter operations. The language is cold. The conclusions are colder. The inquiry notes that no known enemy forces match the observed size and thermal pattern. It stops there. It does not speculate. It simply marks the box that says other and moves on. That single tick other says more than the paragraphs around it. If you want the rest of this investigation, stay with me. This story is just opening its eyes. When we step into the next chapter, we'll lay those documents side by side and follow the black lines to the people who drew them. Make sure you're here for it so you don't miss what those redactions try to hide. For now, come back to the mountain. The day after the Kunar patrol, the squad was ordered to sit down with intelligence. That room was always cold. The air smelled like coffee and printer toner. The analyst in charge was young too, but his voice had learned how to be older. He asked for details that sound small until they don't. Exact time. Wind direction. Battery levels before and after. Radio channel. Distance to the signature. The squad leader gave him the answers that were facts. The analyst nodded. Then he asked the question that is not a checkbox. Did anyone feel anything? They stared at him. He didn't smile. He didn't break eye contact. He repeated the question, softer. The squad leader said yes. He didn't need to explain. The analyst wrote a single word on a separate sheet and slid it into a folder that was not the same folder as the official report. It was thinner. It had no cover. It would leave the room and go somewhere else? The squad leader watched it go and felt a small click in the air. Like the noise a safe makes when it locks, the next week brought a firefight. That had nothing mysterious about it. Dust, muzzles, the clean violence of the known. Men were wounded. Everyone was busy. The Kunar encounter slid into the stack of memories that time reshapes. Still, the story found a way to walk. A platoon in Nuristan traded a detail with a ranger element passing through. Helos brought a rumor to a base in Urazgan. The same detail showed up in a different mouth in Kandahar province. It was always the same word, the one the squad leader wouldn't repeat into a camera. It was a word for something too tall, too still, too old. You may have heard the tale that grew legs online about a giant in the mountains of the south, told in a tone too excited for a battlefield. People share it even now, as if a viral story could be sworn testimony. The military denies it. The dates don't fit. The pieces don't lock together. But the reason such a tale finds traction is simple. The ground was already primed by quieter things that looked nothing like folklore and everything, like the kind of entry a careful soldier places in a box labeled unusual observations. These are not proof. They are the finger that points into a fog. You can ignore the finger if you prefer. The fog remains. Back in the Kandahar Valley, months after the patrol, the snow came late and heavy. It thickened the silence and rubbed the corners off the landscape. Marines rotated in and out. Army units did the same. A new squad took the same ledge the night had forgotten. The point man this time was older. He didn't like legends. He didn't like metaphors. He'd grown up on straight lines. He moved the squad across the ledge and into the bowl at the saddle. The wind scratched at the rock. He swept with his monocular, slow, even, bored. Then he heard it. Not a voice. Not a footstep. A low pressure on the eardrum. A hum so deep it wasn't sound anymore. He blinked and saw the thermal jump. Not at the edge of vision this time, but center frame. He kept the lens on it. He steadied his breath. He watched it hold shape for 3 seconds, then pulse once as if it exhaled, then dissolve without moving. He whispered the sighting to the squad leader. The squad leader said 2 words. Keep walking. In some part of his mind he thought, if there's a thing up here that can hold still and hide heat, it doesn't need to chase us. It wants to see us go. That idea stayed with him longer than he meant it to. He filed his paperwork without poetry. His report was almost plain enough to pass unnoticed, except for 1 sentence. He wrote that the shape seemed to be listening. Not watching, listening. He knew that sounded wrong. He wrote it anyway. Redactions, rumors, and the paper war. Washington, D.C. in winter doesn't whisper, it hums. The hum of fluorescent lights and buildings that never sleep. The hum of data centers cooling themselves with recycled air. The hum of machines that read the wars we write down. In one of those buildings, 4 stories underground, a scanner fed another box of papers into the national memory. The operator, half bored, half numb, didn't notice the thin red line on the edge of one page. The same line that had once sealed a soldier's words in the Afghan night. The file's title was nothing dramatic. Incident Log K-17, Thermal Irregularities. Kandahar, a harmless name for something that should have never come back into the light. But it did because of a clerical mistake, a reclassification error that pushed an old report into the queue of documents slated for digital review. That's how mysteries resurface, not with intent, but with indifference. The analyst assigned to quality check the scan was a civilian contractor named Lisa Moretti. She'd read thousands of reports. She could tell the difference between routine and strange by the rhythm of a page. Most reports marched in predictable steps: location, contact, casualties, conclusion. This one limped. The text had scars. There were blocks of thick black ink where words should live. She hovered her cursor over one redacted section and frowned. The file metadata listed the redactor as DIA Alpha Field, not Army, not CIA. That tag belonged to a division that officially didn't exist anymore. She scrolled. At the bottom, under Psychological Debrief, there was a hand-scrawled note scanned in by mistake. A single sentence, faded, written in ballpoint. Ask Harris about the echo. No date. No signature. Just that echo. The word snagged her attention. In military shorthand, echo could mean anything: a call sign, a radio artifact, a coding name. But this one wasn't typed. It was whispered on the paper. She bookmarked the file. 2 days later, her supervisor called her into an office lined with flag pins and old maps. "Where'd you find that?" he asked. She told him. He nodded too slowly. "That's not ours to handle," he said. Then he reached across the desk, deleted the bookmark, and told her to move on. But she didn't. That night, she searched the internal archive by keyword. Only one other document contained the word echo in a context that didn't fit the usual pattern. After Action Review at Mountain Glass, dated 4 years after the Cunard Patrol. Different province. Different unit. But inside it another description of a listening presence detected during a mountain sweep. The wording was eerily familiar, appeared sentient, engaged without engagement. Someone had copy-pasted a ghost. The next morning, Lisa's access level changed. She didn't notice right away, but when she tried to open the file again, the system told her she no longer had clearance. Her terminal clock blinked twice before freezing. When she rebooted, her credentials had been reset. For a moment, she thought it was a glitch. Then she found the sealed envelope on her desk with no name, just a single sheet of paper inside. It said, "Some mountains aren't supposed to talk back. 2,000 miles away. In North Carolina, the soldier from Kandahar retired, working a quiet security job at a shipping yard, received a phone call from an unknown number. The voice on the other end was calm, female, deliberate. She said she was doing archival correlation work. She asked him to confirm a few lines from his 2003 report. He didn't say yes. He didn't say no. He asked how she got his number. The line clicked dead. That night, his dog began barking toward the woods behind his house. It barked for an hour, the sound stretching into something hollow. The next morning there were prints in the frost longer than human, but barefoot. He laughed it off, told himself they were stretched by thaw. Still, when he went back inside, he locked every window. The bark didn't leave his head. Neither did that word. Echo. Weeks later, Lisa met with a retired intelligence officer at a cafe near the Pentagon. He was gray, slow-moving, the kind of man who looked like he'd been made of files. She asked him what Alpha Field had been. He stirred his coffee for a long time. Special liaison cell, he said finally. Tasked with collection of unconventional engagements. He didn't look up. Stuff that doesn't fit the war, doesn't fit the world. They used to joke that if you can't categorize it, send it to Alpha. She asked what happened to them. He said they didn't retire. They folded inward. When she pressed about Afghanistan, he told her one story. Not classified, just forgotten. 2004, Kandahar province. A ranger unit reported finding bones in a cave, massive ones with fractures too smooth for decay. No video, no samples. The cave was collapsed by airstrike within 24 hours. The official record says structural instability. The officer's eyes said otherwise. Lisa began to see a pattern. Reports of unclassified biological remnants, thermal anomalies, and acoustic distortions, all within similar terrain remote mountain passes with ancient cave systems. The reports never lasted long in archives. The file paths ended with the same notation. Reassigned Dia Alpha Field, close hold. The term meant no further distribution, no public record. It was the bureaucratic equivalent of a black hole. One night, she printed copies and laid them across her kitchen table, connecting dots with red string like a cliché. She hated to become Kundar, Nuristan, Kandahar, each separated by hundreds of miles, yet all sharing the same 3 words in field reports. Tall, silent, listening. At 2:43 a.m. Her laptop camera light flickered on for a fraction of a second. She didn't notice. She was too busy reading an intercepted field memo describing a non-human heat mass exhibiting bipedal gait. Her heart raced as she read the last line before the page cut off. Advise immediate containment. The next page was gone. She backed up everything. Uploaded copies to an encrypted cloud. Sent one to an old friend in journalism. And that's when the silence began. Emails bounced. Her phone reset itself. Her apartment door lock jammed twice in 1 week. It wasn't proof, just pattern. But in her gut, she knew she'd stepped into something not meant to be uncovered. Meanwhile, in the Afghan hills, locals were still telling stories. Journalists embedded with special forces heard whispers about an echoing man that walked between ridges at dusk, leaving footprints that glowed faintly under infrared. One interpreter swore his cousin saw it. When pressed, he said, "Not human. Not spirit. Something waiting." Lisa reached out to that journalist Mark Rains, who had since left war reporting. They met in a parking lot behind a closed museum. He told her that in 2012, his team recovered an audio file from a downed drone near coast. The drone's camera had malfunctioned, but the microphone hadn't. The audio captured 32 seconds of low-frequency noise below human vocal range, rising and falling like breath. When analyzed, the waveform showed rhythmic intervals resembling speech. He sent the file to a linguist. The linguist refused to comment and moved overseas within a month. Rain still had a copy. He played it for her on his phone. It wasn't sound. It was weight. A vibration that seemed to press against the ribs. She turned it off halfway through, trembling. He nodded. "That's why I stopped reporting," he said. When she drove home that night, she noticed a car following her for 7 miles before it vanished near the Potomac. She pulled into her driveway, heart hammering, and saw the faintest shape by her window, a reflection, or maybe just her imagination. But in the morning, her living room curtains were drawn open from the inside. Days later, she went to her terminal at work. The login failed. The system said her credentials had been permanently revoked. She went to the desk of her supervisor, the same one who told her to drop the file. His nameplate was gone. So was his computer. The desk was bare. When she asked around, people said there was never anyone by that name. That night, she opened her phone's photo gallery. Every image of the documents she'd saved was gone. Every backup folder empty. Only one file remained unnamed, with no timestamp. She tapped it. The screen turned black. Then faint words appeared, as if typed one letter at a time. Some echoes don't fade. Somewhere deep under Virginia, a new entry was added to a classified system. The file name, Operation Red Eco Containment Ongoing. And in a small farmhouse 3 states away. The ex-soldier from Kandahar woke at 3:11 a.m. to that same low hum. Outside his window, the kind that lives between sound and silence. He walked to the glass and stared into the woods. This time there was movement, slow, deliberate, like something remembering how to walk. He whispered into the dark, "You followed us home, didn't you?" The answer came not in words, but in the sound of his porch steps creaking. 1 by 1, then dash nothing, only the quiet that listens back. And somewhere, miles away, a red light blinked on a government server, marking a new incident for review. Caves, folklore, and foreign eyes. The cave lay hidden behind a fold in the mountains, where the rock turned red like dried blood. To reach it, you had to climb a trail no satellite could trace, past thorn trees that bent away from the wind. The locals called the place Dara-e-Kamash, the Silent Pass. They said even goats refused to cross it after sunset. When the American patrols arrived years ago, they built a small outpost nearby, unaware that the villagers watched them with quiet pity. Because everyone knew. Things listened there. The old man who told Lisa about the cave was missing an eye. He'd been a shepherd in the valley before the war made soldiers out of everyone. He said the first time he heard the echo, he thought it was thunder trapped in the rocks. The second time, he realized it was breathing. His stories, passed through interpreters and translators, were buried under reports labeled folklore influence. But his voice still carried across the years, captured in a recording she found buried in a field archive. From 2008. Lisa listened to that voice alone in her apartment. The tape crackled. The man's tone never wavered. "They come when the wind stands still," he said softly. "Not men, not jinn. They walk between the stones and whisper names that are not ours." Then, in the silence that followed, there was a faint vibration, almost inaudible. She increased the volume. The vibration grew, layered, rhythmic. Her heart began to race. The waveform on her screen pulsed like breath. She hit pause. The room felt smaller. She was supposed to stop digging. After what happened with her access clearance, the safest thing would have been to let the story die. But safety had already left her. So, she packed a recorder, a small camera, and a letter she never sent and boarded a flight east. By the time she reached Jalalabad, the war had shifted. The bases were emptier, the flags fewer, the walls covered in dust. Through a translator she found the shepherd again, or what was left of him. He was older, slower, but when she mentioned the word echo, his one good eye sharpened. He told her there was another cave, higher than the first, where the Russians once went and never returned. They thought it was gold, he murmured. But it was hollow, not treasure. Hollow like lungs. She convinced him to take her there. The hike took 2 days. The mountain air thinned with each step. Her camera batteries drained faster than expected, though the temperature was mild. The old man noticed but said nothing. On the second night, they camped beneath a cliff where the wind made strange harmonies low, drawn-out tones that rose and fell without direction. That night, she dreamed of the sounds she'd heard on the tape, the breath and the static. It seemed to call her name, drawn out through rock. When she woke, the old man was sitting up, staring into the dark. "They know you're here," he whispered. Not the next morning. They reached the mouth of the cave. The entrance yawned wide enough for a truck, yet the air that came out was warmer than outside, carrying a metallic tang like rust and rain mixed together. Inside, the walls shimmered faintly with moisture, and further down blackness so deep her flashlight seemed to bend around it. Halfway through, she found something scratched into the rock. English words, old and faded, Alpha Field Unit 9, her breath caught. The same phrase that had haunted her in redacted files. It wasn't myth anymore, it was carved into stone. The shepherd refused to go further. He pressed a small talisman into her hand, a coin burned at the edges. "If it calls," he said, "don't answer." Then he left her there. Lisa went deeper. Her flashlight flickered. The tunnel widened into a chamber, perfectly round, as if carved by something deliberate. The floor wasn't smooth rock, it was fused, melted, and in the center lay something she couldn't name. A shape half buried in silt, metallic, but twisted in ways no machine should bend. She knelt, brushing dirt away, revealing markings. Not language, but patterns. Repeating spirals that pulsed faintly under her light. The air thickened. The silence wasn't empty, it pressed back. Her ears rang, not from sound, but from pressure. And then, very softly, something moved. A vibration rose from the floor, low and steady. Her flashlight flickered again, and for a heartbeat, a figure stood at the edge of the chamber, tall, still, watching. She froze. The shape leaned slightly, as if listening. Then it was gone. The hum faded. The silence returned, heavier than before got when she stumbled out into daylight. The shepherd was gone. His footprints led partway down the trail before disappearing altogether. Her camera had stopped recording. Only one frame remained blurry, green-tinged, showing what looked like a human silhouette fused into the rock wall. She didn't go back to Kabul. She crossed into Pakistan under a false name, sent a package of her findings to Rains, and disappeared from every list. Weeks later, Rains received the parcel. Inside was the coin the shepherd had given her, a memory card, and a short note. "The caves listen. Don't go back." The memory card contained 3 audio clips. The first 2 were ordinary wind, footsteps, static. The third was something else entirely. At first, it sounded like the ocean. Then voices emerged from within it, layered, distorted, as if spoken underwater. One phrase repeated faintly, "We were here first." Rains played it twice. Then he unplugged his headphones, staring at nothing. He uploaded the file to a secure server and called an old contact in defense journalism. The next day, his account was locked. 2 days later, his apartment was broken into. Only his computer was missing. Back in the mountains, a NATO supply drone crashed near Kandahar when recovery teams arrived. They found the wreckage intact, but every circuit board inside had fused into a single lump of glass-like material. The official cause was thermal event due to equipment malfunction. Yet the heat signatures in the logs showed no fire. Only a pulse like a heartbeat beneath stone. Reports of strange radio interference began trickling in from different provinces. Soldiers heard whispers in comms channels that weren't open. GPS units looped endlessly over one set of coordinates, the same valley Lisa had entered. Locals started avoiding it again, calling it Wadi Kaf, the Valley of Fear. Rains tried to track her. The name she used on her travel records vanished after the border crossing. Months later, a satellite image surfaced online, one that was quickly scrubbed. It showed a solitary figure standing at the mouth of a cave, arms raised as if listening to the wind. The timestamp matched the week she disappeared, and then an unexpected source came forward, a retired Russian geologist now living in Tbilisi. He'd been part of a Soviet survey team in the late 1980s, sent to study magnetic anomalies near the same region. His story mirrored hers. Equipment failed. Batteries drained. Men vanished. One night, they recorded what they thought was seismic movement. When they played it back, the signal wasn't tectonic. It was patterned. Like a language, he said, but older than language. He showed Rains a fragment of metal he'd kept, claiming it was from the same cave system. It was warm to the touch, though it had been kept in a cold cellar. When Rains tested it with a magnet, it didn't react, but it vibrated faintly when the recorder nearby was switched on, and deep inside another government server, the file named Operation Red Echo expanded with new entries timestamped, geotagged, and marked active observation required. Rains read the leaked transcript weeks later. The last line froze him. Subject Elam reclassified, non-locatable. Environmental resonance persists. Containment advised. He sat in his dark apartment, staring at those words until sunrise. Outside, the air was still. Too still. Then, from the speaker on his desk, the recorder clicked on by itself. A faint hum filled the room. Slow, steady, familiar, the sound of something. Breathing through stone, he whispered her name, and the voice that answered wasn't hers. The hum rose into a single word, stretched like static, one that had haunted every page, every file, every cave. Echo. Then silence deeper than any before. The patrols that wouldn't talk the wind moved like breath over the wire fences of forward operating base Heron. Dust rolled in waves across the landing pad, carrying voices that weren't supposed to exist anymore, voices of the men who had gone missing in the mountains. And those who came back different. Sergeant Miles Kearney hadn't planned on returning to Afghanistan. Not after Kandahar, not after what happened in 2007, when his squad vanished for 11 hours and came back with no memory of where they'd been. But the Defense Intelligence Agency had called him in quietly. No rank, no insignia. Just a contract and a single phrase on the front page. After action reintegration interview, he thought it was a debriefing. It WSN single quotes. Inside the small prefabricated office, two men in plain clothes waited for him. One introduced himself as Dr. Lang, the other didn't give a name. Lang smiled too easily. "We're revisiting some anomalous field reports," he said. "Your unit's record shows inconsistencies. We just need your recollection." Kearney crossed his arms. "We already gave statements." Lang tapped the folder on the desk. "Yes, those are the problem. The statements don't match the timestamps. And the timestamps don't match reality." Kearney didn't answer. The unnamed man adjusted his tie. "We know about the missing hours," he said softly. "We know you weren't asleep. We know you weren't attacked. We just want to know what you saw when the world went quiet." The lights above them flickered once. Kearney swallowed. For a second, he could almost hear the mountains again. The low vibration. The hum under the earth. He didn't answer their question. But later that night, alone in his quarters, he found a photograph tucked under his cot, an image of his old unit, taken just before that patrol. Everyone was smiling, except for one shape in the far background, almost invisible in the dust haze. It wasn't one of them. It was too tall, too still. He tore the picture in half and burned it. 2 days later, he left the base without signing out, half a world away. Rains sat in a motel near the Chesapeake Bay, staring at a wall of evidence, Lisa's notes, his recordings, the Russian metal fragment, and a new file sent anonymously through a secure channel. The subject line read, "FOB Haran recovered audio, priority, black." The audio began with soldiers' chatter, wind, static, then a burst of distortion like thunder underwater. After that came silence followed by a single breath. Deep, steady, and human. Then a voice whispering one word. It wasn't English. It wasn't any known language. But when slowed down, the waveform translated phonetically to home. Rains leaned back, staring at the waveform until it began to look like a pulse. Somewhere in those lines, he thought he could hear Lisa's voice layered, echoing, almost pleading. He tried to sleep that night, but the hum returned, faint and rhythmic. Through the hotel's heating vents, he woke to find his laptop open, a new message on the screen. Stop listening. It listens back. He packed up and drove until dawn. Meanwhile, at Heron, Kearney's disappearance went unreported. The official log showed he had been transferred to Bagram for medical evaluation, but no one at Bagram had seen him. Lang's department filed an internal memo classifying Kearney under post-operational psychosis. His name vanished from duty rosters within a week, but some soldiers whispered otherwise. They said a night patrol found his gear near an old Soviet tunnel 5 kilometers east of base. The boots were empty. His radio was still warm. The last transmission captured on it was just 2 words. It's awake. Lang received that recording too. He didn't play it more than once, but when he did, the sound behind Kearney's voice wasn't static. It was a low, synchronized heartbeat. Not human, not mechanical, something older. He made the mistake of telling his superior that it matched the acoustic patterns from a cave recorded back in 2003, the first encounter, the one that had started everything. Within hours, his credentials were revoked. By morning, his office was cleared and his nameplate replaced by another. Rains heard about it through an anonymous tip. A woman claiming to have worked under Lang contacted him, agreeing to meet in a diner off Route 29. Her hands shook as she poured coffee. She said Lang had found references to an internal project dating back to the Soviet era, a joint U.S.-Afghan-Russian collaboration under the code name Project Mirage. Officially, it was a geological mapping effort. Unofficially, it studied subsurface resonant cavities that seemed to respond to human movement. Resonant? Rains asked. She nodded. Like alive. She handed him a thin envelope. Inside were thermal images, blurry, green and gold. But one detail stood out. In each photo, a tall figure stood at the edge of a fissure. Always the same shape, same height, same stance. Its body emitted no heat. Yet everything around it glowed. Before he could ask another question, she pushed back her chair. Don't contact me again, she whispered. You can't stop a sound that's still traveling. That night, Rains uploaded the images to a secure cloud server. But as they processed, he saw something impossible. The silhouettes in the photos began to shift. Frame by frame, pixel by pixel, each leaning slightly toward the camera. He slammed the laptop shut. Halfway across the world, inside a classified communications hub near Kabul, a technician monitoring radio frequencies froze as his console flashed red. An unregistered signal had appeared for the first time in years on the same frequency range used during early Operation Red Echo transmissions. The source coordinates pointed to an area long abandoned by NATO. The technician switched on the receiver. A deep hum filled the room, followed by a faint female voice repeating 2 words in English. We're here. By dawn, the frequency was gone. Rains didn't know any of this yet. He was already driving north, chasing one last lead of contact, claiming to have been part of a covert recovery unit assigned to contain whatever was found in those mountains. The man refused to meet in public. They met in a parking garage, the smell of gasoline heavy in the air. The man's face was half in shadow. It wasn't supposed to leave the valley, he said. They thought it was an echo. A frequency. But frequencies don't move. This did. Rains asked what it was. The man hesitated. It's not one thing, he said slowly. It's the place. The sound, the reflection of everything that's ever died there. It listens until it learns. Then it copies. Rains stared. Copies what? The man met his eyes. Us. He left before Rains could reply. That night, Rains played the audio from Kearney's radio one last time. He slowed it down to half speed. Beneath the static, beneath the heartbeat, another sound emerged. A voice, female, clear. Mark! Lisa's voice. He froze. The file wasn't a recording of the past. It was live, the waveform shifted on its own. A new message appeared in the audio file's metadata. Open the door. He glanced toward the motel door. The knob moved once. Then twice. He shut off the lights and sat in silence, pulse pounding. Outside, footsteps scraped against the gravel. They stopped just beyond the door. A shadow passed under the crack too tall to be hers. Then, faintly, the hum began again, low, deep, everywhere. He covered his ears, but it wasn't in the air anymore. It was in the walls. The next morning, the motel room was empty. The clerk said the man who checked in had left around midnight. No one saw where he went, but the night guard swore he heard something strange through the walls after that, like a chorus of distant breathing. Moving in sync. In a government facility outside Arlington. The Operation Red Echo file updated automatically at 3:14 hours. A new entry appeared under subject, R. Mark Rains, status, unlocatable. Signal persists. And in the mountains of Kandahar, a patrol of local shepherds reported seeing strange lights near the mouth of a cave long sealed by rockfall. They said the ground was vibrating softly, like the earth itself was whispering. When asked what it said, one man answered, eyes wide with fear. It said his name. The file closed itself after that. The last red line. The file had no title when it appeared inside the archive, just a single letter, E, and a date that didn't exist on any calendar. The timestamp flickered between 2 years, 2003 and 2025, as if caught between memory and something else. The technicians who found it tried to delete it. They couldn't. Each time they hit erase, it duplicated itself, smaller, fainter, but still alive. One of them whispered, "Maybe it doesn't want to be gone?" Within an hour, the server room lights began to dim one by one. In a quiet office far from that hum, Dr. Lang reappeared. His eyes looked hollow, his voice a whisper of what it used to be. He'd been missing for months, presumed dead after the shutdown of Project Mirage. But that morning, he walked through the door of a small university lab in Maryland, holding an old hard drive sealed in plastic. "This," he said to the startled graduate assistant inside, "was never supposed to see daylight." He connected the drive. The screen blinked to life. Lines of corrupted code scrolled like a heartbeat, each frame containing fragments of images, mountains, caves, and faint human silhouettes standing among firelight. One of them was Lisa Moretti. She wasn't moving, but her eyes, those eyes were open. Lang sat in silence for a long time. The assistant whispered, "Is that real?" Lang didn't answer. He simply said they were mapping frequencies, but they found something that mapped them back. He slid a piece of paper across the desk. On it, coordinates Schooner Province, and beneath them 3 words, "It still speaks." That same night, halfway across the world, in the dark corridors of the abandoned Heron base, a faint orange light glowed in one of the data vaults. A generator that hadn't run in years suddenly roared to life. Monitors flickered. A file opened by itself, the same one Lang had just accessed. The radio tower outside began to pulse, sending out a repeating signal on an old, unused military band. The villagers in the valley below said the ground hummed all night like a machine breathing. They could feel it in their bones. Some claimed to hear words between the pulses, names, places, commands. Others said it sounded like someone calling for help. Rains would have known the sound. But he was gone. Or at least the man who had been Rains. Because 3 weeks after his disappearance, a U.S. Navy surveillance drone captured footage of a solitary figure walking through the Kandahar ridgeline. No weapon, no gear, just a human outline, barefoot in snow, walking against the wind. When the drone zoomed in, the figure looked up. The eyes glowed faintly. And the camera feed cut out. Lang watched that clip from a secure terminal days later. The footage ended abruptly, but for a single frame just before the cutoff there was a reflection in the drone's lens. Not of Rains, but of something standing behind him. Something taller. The image blurred before it could resolve. Lang paused the frame and whispered, "Echo." He began drafting a report, the kind written in code meant for readers who already knew too much. He listed dates, locations, coordinates. Then he wrote one final line at the bottom: "The entity is not contained. It is learning." He pressed send. The message never left his computer. The system locked him out, then erased everything. Every backup. Every trace. At dawn, Lang packed the drive, wrapped it in cloth, and left the building. He drove until the city disappeared behind him, until the radio lost its signal and only static remained. He stopped at a rest area somewhere in Virginia, sat on the hood of his car, and stared at the horizon. The hum returned, low and familiar, rolling through the earth like thunder waiting to decide if it will strike. He turned on the recorder one last time. His voice was steady. "If this message reaches anyone, know this. It isn't one creature or one legend. It's resonance. A consciousness made of everything we buried: sound, heat, blood, memory. The mountains aren't hiding it. They are part of it." He paused. "And now it knows our language." The tape ended with a faint sound. Not his breath. Not static. A whisper: "We remember." Weeks later, a cleanup team arrived at the Maryland facility to catalog what was left of Lang's work. They found the lab empty except for a single note on the whiteboard. "The last red line is us." One of the technicians laughed nervously, erasing it. But when he looked down at the desk, he noticed the old hard drive still connected. It was glowing faintly from within. Not heat, not light, something else. He unplugged it, dropped it into a containment case, and shipped it to a secure vault under Arlington. 2 days later, the vault's sensors detected movement inside and in Kandahar. The villagers said the mountain was speaking again, this time, not in echoes but in voices, clear, human, a dozen at once, saying the same thing: "We are still here." That same night, a classified U.S. satellite recorded a new signal rising from the region. The transmission lasted 41 seconds and contained encrypted coordinates looping endlessly. The coordinates pointed not to Afghanistan, but to a small rural town in Virginia. The same place Lang's car was later found, abandoned by the roadside. Its radio still playing a faint hum. Inside the Pentagon, the Operation Red Eco file updated for the final time. The entry was brief: status, self-propagating. Global resonance in progress. No one knew what that meant. No one dared to ask. But those who were awake that night, scattered soldiers, archivists, villagers, swore they felt something pass through them. A vibration like the sound of a voice too large to belong to any single throat. Some covered their ears. Others listened. And in that moment, across continents and screens, the world itself seemed to inhale. Then, from somewhere deep beneath the mountains, a single tone rose, long, mournful, familiar, a human heartbeat. Magnified across the earth, the lights flickered in every military command post, still running old Afghan frequencies. For 6 seconds, every monitor showed the same image: a silhouette in a cave, standing motionless, head tilted upward as if listening. Then the image vanished, replaced by a single word in red. Echo. After that, transmission ceased. But if you stood near the right mountain on the right night and placed your hand to the ground, you could still feel it, a pulse, slow, patient, listening back.